in high school in Hawaii. We were skipping school for surfing, for having fun, for doing things that we loved all the time. And when I got into college, I actually went to Maui Community College at first because I tested into the classes there, and I tested at a level of basic math and basic English. So I'm telling you guys, if you guys can learn things. If I can learn things, you guys can learn things. I got out and I started off with basic math and basic English at the community college. And I was lucky enough to get into a program that had a go at your own pace math class. So in 6 months, I was already up to calculus. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And I continued on to university. I went to Cal Poly. Well, I went to University of Hawaii, then Cal Poly, and studied engineering there. Got a job working at a company in Hawaii. I was contracted out by Northrop Grumman designing telescopes. And these were fast moving telescopes that could move across the horizon quickly. They don't really tell you what it's for. They just kind of tell you what they're looking for. Well, what's a fast moving telescope moving across the horizon? What's the point of that anyway? You guys can use your imaginations. So we're designing things, we're having a lot of fun, but I was sitting at a desk constantly and I enjoyed it. It was good intellectual work. It was stimulating. It was a lot of fun. I had semi-interesting people around me. I was a little more outgoing than most. And what had happened was my body just started falling apart. My hands were hurting. My back was hurting. My neck was hurting. I was mousing it all day long. I was getting tendonitis on the back of my hands from being at the mouse, doing the programming and designing all day long. Now, I had been to a chiropractor before. When I was in probably 5th grade, elementary school, my mother got in a pretty bad car accident. And she had decided to go to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor helped her out tremendously from post-concussion syndrome, which I don't think it was referred to that at the time, but kind of understanding what was going on, it sounds like post-concussion syndrome, migraines, whiplash, different type of issues that she had as a result of a car accident. And you guys are going to probably see tons of people who have been in car accidents over your career. I know I have. So the chiropractor got to talking with her about what chiropractic is. And my mother kind of, she didn't really think too highly of it, but she's like, I don't know, there might be something to this. He said something about the body can heal itself. And the way that she described it to me was that he just sounded kind of spiritual and woo-woo. And anyway, she said, well, I don't know. My son is playing a lot of sports. I was playing football at the time and Pop Warner football. And later on, I played football in high school. And so she decided, hey, my son is getting tackled. My skinny white boy son was getting tackled by these giant Tongans and Samoan kids. Might as well take him to see a chiropractor and get him put back together. That was exactly what he did. So I started seeing a chiropractor every now and then when I was younger, but I never thought of it as a career. One day after work, designing these telescopes and working on those, I was just browsing the internet, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I decided to look up chiropractic and what is chiropractic. And I found a story of a gentleman, you probably know who this is, who had engineering experience, and he had severe arthritis. And he had gone to a chiropractor, and he had just tremendous effects on the quality of his life and his health and his ability to function and his ability to move. And then he decided, hey, I'm going to become a chiropractor. And so he did, and he developed a technique in chiropractic from an engineering standpoint. At least this is what the story portrayed. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So You can help people. You can work with people all day long, which I love to do, which I wanted to do. I enjoy being around people. And I get to use my engineering training or coming from that perspective in my career. So I decided, hey, I'll go to chiropractic school. By the way, can any of you guess who that chiropractor was that I was reading about?
Gonstead.
Gonstead, of course, everybody knows Gonstead. I can't fool you guys. So that led into my journey to becoming a chiropractor. And of course, in engineering school, we didn't take any biology or organic chemistry. I didn't have that. So I had to go to South Lake Community College. And this is going to come up again later in the talk here tonight, I think. But South Lake Tahoe Community College to take a few credits of organic chemistry and a biology class so I could get into chiropractic college and continue my journey. While I was there, I was snowboarding one day. We lived right at the base of Heavenly up in, oh, well, you guys aren't really from California anyway, but around Lake Tahoe. And I was snowboarding one day, and after doing the big jumps all day, I was on my way down the hill, and I decided to hit the small park on my way down, and I overturned on the jump. My nose dug in, and I fell. I was catapulted onto my side, onto my left side, and it snapped my humerus right in half, like snapping a pencil. And this left me in, I wasn't in any pain. Hey, what do you know? No pain, really. Just kind of shocked. They took my jacket off. They were about to cut off my jacket. And instead of cutting it off, I said, hey, no, I really like this jacket. Can we just take it off? Because I wasn't hurting much. I didn't even know the arm was broken. I slid the jacket off, and you could see the lower part of my humerus was over and up. So I had this zigzag shaped arm. All the muscles had contracted and pulled that bone up along the side of the superior aspect of it. And that's when I started to have a deeper fascination with the anatomy of the human body. And so I looked at that and I thought, wow, what the heck is going on here? I had been taking an anatomy class at the university or at the community college as well. So I started to really dive into that. And I started to ask myself about healing of the human body and what is causing the body to heal. The first real question that came to mind was because there was a mistake that was done when they bolted my arm back together. They put a titanium rod through it, a couple bolts up here, bolt down here. And when they had put it in, I noticed that my range of motion was still quite limited. And I was going to PT and trying to get things back together. But I went back to my orthopedic follow-up appointment, and we're looking at the x-rays. She pulled up the x-rays on the screen there. It was on her computer, and I was looking at it, and I was like, wow, looks like the titanium rod is sticking out the top of the bone. I was like, oh, is that what's going on? Is the titanium rod sticking up out of the bone causing that problem? And she looked at me with a look that I'll never forget. And she said, oh, no, that's just what it looks like on the x-ray. And I thought to myself, oh, okay. Me not knowing anything about x-rays really, but having a critically thinking mind at least. And that's when I really started to question how we communicate with people. And it started to get me even more fascinated with anatomy of the human body and how that rod was interfering with the ranges of motion. So I had to go get that taken out. It was a year later before I had it taken out. So I started chiropractic school in 2006. And in quarter one, I sat at the front of the room, first class, first day. And the professor, Sean Dill at the time, you guys familiar with Sean Dill? I know a lot of people are these days, and some people like him, some people don't. And You know, that's how it's going to be with everybody. And some people are going to like you, and some people aren't going to like you. You'll notice that maybe when you get into clinic. How many of you, some of you that are in clinic right now seeing out patients, how many of you have had an experience where a patient might not have thought too highly of you? Maybe. I know I did, at least with one of my first patients that comes to mind. And he went around the room and he asked everybody a simple question. He said, "What is chiropractic?" You can think about that for yourself. What is chiropractic? And what was fascinating was that the vast majority of the room, 30, I think there was 43 students actually at the time, and the vast majority of them had completely different answers. Holy smokes. What was I getting myself into? So after, I'm going to change this view. So there we go. So I started to think more and more about that. And I studied more and more about chiropractic. And in our first quarter, we had to actually memorize the 33 principles, at least the titles of the 33 principles. And we had to memorize the normal complete cycle. Do you guys do anything like that these days? I think that in the fraternity, you're encouraged to learn and memorize the 33 principles at least. The normal complete cycle, it's excellent to go through, but when you break it down, it's really just the simple cycle, the safety pin cycle. I know some of you are in the fraternity and some of you are just others not in the fraternity as well, but the fraternity is a great resource for philosophy and understanding these things. So I began to dive into the 33 principles and tried to really understand, not only memorize them, but really understand what they meant. Later on in my schooling, I actually went on to memorizing word for word, verbatim, all of the 33 principles. And that was a very valuable lesson. It sounds like just a rote, tedious thing, which it was, but it really got me to understand chiropractic philosophy on a deeper level. Now, I don't want this to be too complicated and complex, and I don't want to dive into all these little individual things. I'm not going to show you a PowerPoint. I'm sure you guys are sick of PowerPoints in your classes and always listening to those from your instructors right now that you're on Zoom most of the time. But the principle that stood out to me, so I'm just going to talk here a little bit, but the principle that stood out to me was principle number 24. And that actually is or principle number 23, excuse me, I almost made a mistake there. 23, the function of innate intelligence. The function of innate intelligence is to adapt universal forces and matter for use in the body so that all parts of the body have harmonious action for mutual benefit. So that principle really got me kind of inspired about chiropractic. But let's break that down a little bit. What is chiropractic philosophy? I just want to hear it from you guys. If you guys could speak up and just unmute yourself. What is chiropractic philosophy to you? Keith, what's chiropractic philosophy from your understanding?
So this actually makes me think back to a conversation I had with Brother Mouse. He was breaking down the 5 branches of philosophy, and he was explaining them actually in a way I've never heard before. And this it was funny because it's a one-on-one conversation. Nobody else had it. Nobody got to hear it, but I've always repeated what he said. And he talked about the breakdown and flow of how the branches actually move. So it starts with metaphysics, moves to epistemological, then moves to ethics, politics, and then aesthetics. And so he was explaining how the metaphysics is first starting defining the why. Defining why does this even exist in the first place? Why does this need to exist? Why does it occur? The epistemology start to moving into kind of the more heady and more specifics of it. But to me, the philosophy is defining why does this need to exist in the first place? That's really, that's my takeaway.
Yeah, that's a good one. Why does this need to exist in the first place? Cameron, how about you, buddy? What's philosophy mean to you? You didn't think you were going to get called on today, did you?
To be honest, I don't really.
Oh, I think I lost your volume.
Is any of that better?
There we go.
So, to be honest, right now, I don't really have an answer for you. I'm starting to slowly get into it myself now. So,
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah. And it'll be an ever evolving journey. Guess what? You're probably going to change your mind in the future too. Who would have thought? By the way, people are going to tell you a lot of things. All of you, they're going to tell you a lot of things. And they're going to be very passionate. They're going to have a lot of evidence coming from all different directions. But never let other people's opinions be so loud that you forget to form an opinion of your own. And an insight and ideas of your own. Chiropractic philosophy really breaks down into two parts. With that being said, I'm going to tell you what I think. Chiropractic philosophy really breaks down into two parts. Let me start with the first part. We have to define two words, mechanism and vitalism. If you've heard these two words. These are the two foundational thought processes of all of healthcare. So what is vitalism? Vitalism is the process or the thought process of looking at the body as a whole and understanding that there is an innate, see, a lot of different professions use the word innate. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that when I got into chiropractic school. There's an innate inborn intelligence within the body that heals the body to the best of its ability with regards to structural matter and with regards to the limitations of that matter. So the vitalistic perspective is looking at the human body and saying there's an innate intelligence and we have to look at the body as a whole. The mechanistic perspective is saying we need to break down if there's a problem with the intestines, for example, we are allowed to, and we are able to, and we can take the intestines and just take those apart and look at the intestines and see what the problem is in there and go in and fix that. And if there's a problem with the kidneys, same thing. Oh, you have kidney disease. And this is common, this is the common allopathic model. And that's not really a controversial thing to say. I think if you said that to any healthcare professional, they would understand what you're talking about. So this is not controversial by any means. It's just the idea of taking apart individual parts of the body and saying if there's a problem there, let's focus on that and fix that. If I have a broken arm, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the doctor to come in and look at my leg to see if that's going to help my arm heal from that break and that fracture. So with that being said, the mechanistic model does have a purpose. It's got a great purpose. You know, we need to take apart sections of the body from time to time. Both of these perspectives are very valuable, the vitalistic model and the mechanistic model. But if we're looking at the long-term health and well-being of the individual, that's when we need to look at the vitalistic model. The mechanistic model puts things into boxes. The vitalistic model takes away those boxes and looks at everything from a holistic perspective. That's kind of a hippie woo-woo term. I'm from the Bay Area here, so we're used to hearing all kinds of hippie woo-woo stuff. Yeah, I know you guys are from all over the place. So we have the mechanistic model, we have the vitalistic model. The vitalistic model is looking at the entire human being. Now, the second part of chiropractic philosophy, so if I didn't make that point clear, chiropractic is a vitalistic model. versus the mechanistic perspective. The second part of chiropractic philosophy is the idea of looking at the nervous system, the neurological system, and using that and having an understanding of that as it's the epicenter for control and regulation and delegation for the rest of the body. For all the 30 to 70 trillion cells, I always hear people throwing out big numbers, 100 trillion, 200 trillion cells. If you Google it, I Googled it one day. I was like, well, let's see what Google says. Google says about 32 trillion, I think it was what it was on my last look. 32 trillion cells, and they're all doing individual different things. Our body is really a community of 32 trillion cells. And I encourage you guys to take this idea and look at that. Now, just like any governmental system, this is all part of chiropractic philosophy in a way. I'm just going to break it down with some analogies, I think. In any system, when you have a household, you typically have somebody who's the head of the household, who is kind of the decision maker for the household. Sometimes it's delegated out, right? Certain people will make certain decisions for the household, but there's a delegate head of the household. Then you can look at the community, okay, like a city. Now in a city, you have who's the head of the household in the city? It's the government. Right? Maybe the mayor or the governor. And you have the county level. You have the leadership levels in that. And then we break it down and we have the state level. We have the government there. And we have the different levels of organization for the state. And then even higher, we have different levels of organization for the country. And then maybe even the world. We're just not quite there yet. Maybe we are. We just don't know it. So it's the same thing with the body, with the human body. Now, with the country, we can take a look at this country, for example, United States. I don't know if there's people calling from outside the United States. But if we look at the US here, we have the government. We have the president of the United States, and we have, all the bodies within that. Then we have systems where each state can coordinate things on their own. They can, have control to a certain degree on their own. And it's the same thing within the human body. We have organ systems that do certain things on their own, that have their own, all the cells in the kidney, for example, all of that create the Bowman's capsules and the loops of Henle and the medulla and all that stuff. You guys would know this better than I do by now. And they do their things and they don't need a lot of guidance, but they do need guidance at certain times when the nervous system, when your neurological system is saying that they need certain guidance. So the head, the president, so to speak, is the brain, the neurological system. And in chiropractic, we think of the head of that system as innate intelligence. Fancy word for just an intelligence that governs the body. We get to label things to help with our understandings, right? Like innate intelligence that helps communicate. And so in chiropractic, we are looking at a vitalistic perspective, and we are looking at the neurological system. Then we look at if there's a problem with the communication in the body, if there's a problem with healing of the human body, well, let's go to the top. Let's go to the person who's in charge. That's innate intelligence, or the neurological system, if you prefer. So in chiropractic, we're looking at how do we address that? And we address that. And if you look at chiropractors across the world, any of you in WCCS, World Congress of Chiropractic Students? I remember when I was a student, I took part in that, and I went on one of their congresses to Mexico City. And one of the surprising things to me that I found there was the diversity of the definition of chiropractic and what chiropractic was. Anyway, that year we had a delegate speak, Dr. Jerry Klum, who was the president of the World Chiropractic Association, or World Federation of Chiropractic, I think. I'm losing that right now. Anyway, he was the president of that. And he came in and he said, with chiropractic being around the world and the definitions evolving and changing, there's one thing that chiropractors all have in common. There's one thing. And that one thing is the spine. No matter what perspective they're looking at, is the spine. So this was in my maybe fourth or fifth quarter of chiropractic school, in my second year. And then I started to think about techniques a little more heavily because I was going into clinic. I felt like I needed to at least become proficient at one technique. And it was in my ninth quarter when I was starting student clinic. I found myself sitting on the front steps of the school after school was over. It was in the summer. And I was depressed. And the reason that I was depressed was because I couldn't figure out what technique to do. You guys probably have people coming in preaching to you on a constant basis about why their technique is the best. This was almost 15 years ago now, so maybe it's a little less dogmatic. I'm not sure. And I was in a conundrum. I didn't know what to do. Should I do upper cervical? Should I do CBP? Should I do network? Or should I do CBP? It was just all these different things coming at me. And I was sitting there and I was like, well, what do I do? What's the right thing to do? I wanted to do the best job that I could for my patients. And I didn't know what that was. And rightfully so. Everybody was coming in saying their technique was the best. The top CBP guys would say, people say you can't see a subluxation on X-ray. They're yelling at us in class. And I'm thinking, Deed was there. You can't see X-ray or you can't see subluxation on an X-ray. And he throws up an X-ray. What's that? That's a subluxation. Then you go to the knee, chest, upper cervical guys, which I was super into at the time. And they're saying, you need a clear scan. That's the definition of subluxated or unsubluxated. How many of you can relate to this? So I sat down and I analyzed these. I was like, okay, what's the definition of subluxation free? What does it mean to be free of subluxation? Alex.
Definition of subluxation? The condition of a vertebra that has lost its proper juxtaposition to the vertebra above, below, or both, to an extent less than a luxation, which can interfere with the impingement of the transmission of mental impulses.
Oh my gosh, what a guy. Love it, love it. That is. Stevenson wrote it. He wrote it. BJ approved it. There it is. So I started to look at all these different techniques and really assessing what does it mean to be subluxation free. So in CBP, what does it mean to be subluxation free? Any CBP heads in here? Anybody into that? What does that mean in CBP? Curves, right?
We don't get CBP in at Parker.
Oh, you don't? Oh, do you guys? Okay. At Life West, we had a variety of techniques.
Yeah.
So we had, I don't know, 8 of them, 9 of them, something like that as core.
I think we have 5.
5? Okay. Yeah. So CBP, basically curves of the spine, 60-degree curves, looking at somebody's posture on a global scale and correcting the curves. So that's CBP's main focus. What about NUCA? You guys have NUCA? No? NUCA, orthogonality. Okay, what does that mean? The atlas and how the head sits upon the atlas is orthogonal, 90 degrees. It's not tilted, right? If you have a shift of the atlas, by the way, I teach at the chiropractic college, and I'm constantly surprised at the upper quarter students. I ask them, what is, if I have a right head tilt, what way would I expect my atlas to have shifted? Think about that one for a second. If I have right head tilt, or you have a patient that walks in, they got right head tilt, what's kind of the first thought that might pop into your head? Think about biomechanics of the spine. You would think that the atlas shifts to the right, okay? If you have right head tilt, the atlas glides under. It's like if you have a ball, if you're holding a ball and it rolls to the right, where are you going to move your hand? To the right. Yes? Yes. So that's normal biomechanics. You guys can look this up on your own. Normal biomechanics of the spine. Atlas shifts to the right, or if you have right head tilt, they probably have a right atlas. Now, I've been a chiropractor in practice for almost 11 years now, and I've seen it the other way as well. But you know, a good percentage of the time, it's pretty much that. So a right atlas, and if you have the plane line of your head here, and you got the plane line of the atlas looking from an A to P view or a Nasium view, if it's off kilter, it's not 90 degrees, it's not orthogonal. So in NUCA, it's orthogonality. What about diversified technique? What's the big indicators for diversified? That you are subluxation free. What's the definition of subluxation free? Well, look at what they look at most of the time. What? Leg length and fixation, right? Leg length and fixation, okay? So you got even legs, maybe, and the fixations are gone. Yeah, majority of the time, right? Some people, now different chiropractors will combine different things. So I think you guys are getting my point here. This is why I was depressed. So what am I doing? What am I doing here? So I began to analyze and study a variety of techniques, not just one technique. And really look at, okay, what are the commonalities of all of the techniques? Well, they all address something in the spine. So I decided I'd get really good at understanding the spine. I carried around a spine with me, and I looked at it every day, 10 times a day. I sat there, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 30 seconds, and I traced the outline of the spine with my eyes. I would feel it. I would palpate it. Plastic spine, of course, right? And I would do that every single day. I did that for the better portion of a year. I also palpated or adjusted 10 people a day or examined. Sometimes it was quick, just examining, just feeling different body types. Sometimes I would take my time and really dive in. And there's two types of ways that you should be palpating. One is quick scans, where you have, maybe you're in a classroom setting or you're doing one of your groups, palpating groups or whatever you guys do, where you got 10 people lined up and you all go around and you just kind of take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and you kind of feel somebody's neck and palpate and see how things are going, and you can feel the differences between everybody. And the second way is to take your time, take a longer amount of time, and really focus on one person. Imagine, here, put your hand on the back of your neck right now. Or if you're with somebody like Dylan is there, maybe you can palpate each other. Now think about, what does the skin feel like? Now try to put your focus entirely on the skin and only feel the skin. This is how you're going to develop your palpation skills, by the way, in a dramatic way. I promise you. That's my opinion. Focus only on the skin. See if you can actually focus. Right nowadays, it's so hard to focus with everything. Is it loose? Is it taut? Is it thick? Is it thin? All of this information is coming in through your hands to your sensory cortex. Just try to recognize that. And think about all the options that could be there. Is it lumpy? Is it bumpy? Is it wrinkly? Is it smooth? Then go a little bit deeper and try to analyze the adipose tissue layer underneath that skin. Is it dense tissue? Is it loose adipose tissue? Now, the more and more people that you palpate, the better you're going to get at this, because you'll actually notice the differences. Then we go a little bit deeper to the muscle. Try to palpate only the muscle and only focus on the muscle. Is it taut? Is it loose? Is it stringy and fibrous? Is it dense? Is it hypertrophied? What does the muscle feel like? And imagine what that muscle is doing. What's the job of muscle, by the way? The number one job. We know it does a bunch of things. The number one job of muscle is to mobilize and stabilize. The number one job of muscle is to mobilize and stabilize. So when you think about muscle, and when you think about somebody has a muscle problem, because people are going to come to you and talk about their muscle problems all the time. Oh, I think it's just muscle and this and this and this. Remember what the job of muscle is. It's to mobilize and stabilize. Now, what tells the muscle to contract, to mobilize or stabilize? It's your brain, okay? So you can rub out knots and all kinds of stuff all day long. And I know there's some value to muscle work techniques. My brother-in-law is a big ART guy. But when you're not looking at why that's there in the first place, then you're kind of missing the picture. So put your hand back on your neck. Now go a little bit deeper to the bone. Focus on just the bone. The spinous processes, if you can, the transverse processes. Think about the anatomy of the bone. If you've actually gone that far to kind of understand the anatomy, try to imagine in your mind's eye the picture of that bone underneath your hand, or those bones, whatever it might be. Imagine how they move. The atlas sits on top of the axis. It's got planar joints. Okay, it's kind of like this, like a teepee. Planar joints. The occiput sits on top of the atlas in these cup-like joints. It's a little wider in the back. That's for mechanical advantage. There's no waste of space or waste of structure in the body. When it's for mechanical advantage, so when we extend and flex, there's a little bit of pressure. We have these jelly bean shaped condyles that sit on the top of the atlas superior facets. Okay. So going through that anatomical exercise so you can understand the anatomy, and get your friends out and do this with each other, palpate each other and go deep. You can even get a sense for the rest of their body. If you're palpating their neck and you sense and you can feel maybe they have a reverse cervical curve, think about what that's doing to the thoracic spine. Think about what that's doing to the rib cage coming around. Think about what that's doing to the lungs and how they breathe. Think about how the heart might be affected. Is the heart affected by, is the cardiovascular system affected by the spine? Of course it is. You got, your body's a big unit, a big harmonious acting unit, right? When you're subluxation free, right? So I encourage you guys to at the very least, study the anatomy of the spine. Study the philosophy, the 33 principles. Study the normal complete cycle at the very least. Again, my favorite principle is number 23, the function of innate intelligence. The function of innate intelligence is to adapt universal forces and matter for use in the body so that all parts of the body have coordinated action for mutual benefit. Let's break that down a little bit. How are we on time here? We got a few minutes. We go until 7?
Yeah, it should work, Doc.
What are universal forces? When we look at universal forces, what do you think of? Quan, what do you think of? Are you still there, Quan? Spencer, what do you think of with universal forces?
in regards to the,
What are they?
oh, they're destructive.
They are destructive. You guys are the greatest. You guys are the greatest. Universal forces are destructive with regards to structural matter, right? And innate force is constructive. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's like defining the definition, but using the word in the definition. So let's break down universal forces for a second. Universal forces. Now I studied physics quite a bit, and we talked about the universal forces. Well, I don't remember what we called it per se, but we have 4 fundamental forces in the universe. We have gravity. Now we're still not quite sure what gravity is. Some physicists talk about it as a pulling force or a pushing force or a falling force or all kinds of, or a density of space-time or something thereof. We have gravity. We have electromagnetism. Now Faraday, you guys are probably all familiar with Faraday, right? He was the big guy. As the story goes, Faraday goes to the queen and he says, "Hey queen, look at this." He's got a magnet and he moves it over a wire and he can measure a charge on the other end. And the queen says, "What the hell do you want me to do with that?" And he says, "Queen, give me a lot of money. I'm going to develop this into an amazing technology." And he did, because it used to be thought that electricity and magnetism were 2 different things. So he really combined the 2 and defined electromagnetism. So we have gravity, we have electromagnetism. And then we look at the nuclear forces within the atoms. We have the strong force and the weak force, which are the forces that hold molecules and atoms together. Really, the nucleuses of atoms together. So we have 4 fundamental forces. Those are the universal forces. We can break down every force in the universe. Some people say, oh, wind and rain and corrosion and somebody punches you in the face and all these things. But you can always break those down into those fundamental 4 universal forces. So it's the job of innate intelligence to adapt those forces for use in your body, so that all parts of your body will have coordinated action for mutual benefit. That's the most vitalistic principle that I can think of. Then we look at my next favorite principle is principle number 24, the limits of adaptation. The function of innate intelligence is to adapt forces and matter for use in the body, as long as it can do so without breaking as long as it can do so without breaking a universal law, or innate intelligence is limited by the limitations of matter. So that's chiropractic in a nutshell. Having an innate intelligence, a vitalistic approach, focusing on the neurological system, and using a technique of some form to influence that. What technique is best? Who knows? There's tons of arguments all around, different ways, and maybe one technique's better for some things than another. I would encourage you all just to pick a technique and go with it, just to choose something, and get really good at it. And you know what? 95% of the people that were all into a certain technique when I was in school, guess what they're doing now? Completely different technique in practice. The ones that were the most dogmatic even. Can you imagine that? Can you picture some of your fellow students who are really dogmatic about a certain technique? Can you just know they're probably maybe not, maybe they're unique, but probably going to change their technique that they do in the future anyway. So kind of breaking this down, last couple things here. Study the 33 principles, get to know those. Memorize those to the best of your ability if you can, because when you internalize them and you're able to teach other people, then you'll actually really understand them. Always teach, because when you teach, you learn twice as much. Simplify to the safety pin cycle when you're talking with patients. Keep it simple. Remember the functions of the body, how they relate to the nervous system. Keep that in the back of your mind whenever you're taking your physiology classes, anatomy classes, whatever it might be. And put yourself in your patient's shoes. This is the final thing. Think about where your patients are coming from. Look down at your feet right now. If you're wearing shoes. If you're not wearing shoes, look over at your shoes by the door. Imagine those aren't your shoes, but your patient's shoes, or the person you're taking care of. Put yourself in those shoes. Think about, why is the person there really? Not to get rid of pain. It's easy to get rid of pain. People are there to get their life back, to do the things that they want to do, to be the person that they want to be, so that they can have the life that they want to have. It was a pleasure speaking with you all. Should we end with some questions here, or how are we doing?
Yeah, Doc, that was fire. Absolutely. Yeah, anybody got any questions? We'll wrap it up here with a few.
Yeah, I want to know. You said you were depressed with picking out your technique. I was wondering if you ever figured that out.
Yeah, I got into knee chest, upper cervical knee chest. I don't know. I think there's even variations of knee chest. Like I learned that there was about 2 or 3 different variations depending on how you looked at it. So yeah, I got into that pretty heavily, and I did that for the first 2 or 3 years of practice. Then I switched techniques. One of the reasons was my wife is also a chiropractor, and her dad is a chiropractor, and we were coming to a point where we were probably going to inherit his practice. We had built our own practices. And so we were coming to a point where we're trying to look at how we want the practice to run. And so we just started to integrate our practices. She did full spine alone. So did my father-in-law, and I did knee, chest, upper cervical. And we started to integrate things. And you know what I realized? Like, I've heard this before, that patients don't care about technique, but I didn't really believe it, right? They're like, yeah, they do. They got to get the right technique. You got to convince them that you're doing the right technique and sell them on your technique. Don't sell people on your technique. It's not, people are going to care more about what you're doing for them if you can talk to them in a simple way. People didn't care. I was kind of worried. I was like, oh man, really? Am I going to transition to this kind of full spine technique and people aren't going to like that? People didn't even care. They didn't even say anything. Anyways, I still use knee chest to this day as a solid adjustment, but yeah, we have more of a full spine type practice. And I use a variety of techniques in my office to accomplish whatever my goals might be with that patient. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, and then I guess the second follow up, I guess, to that question would have been because I'm kind of in that like area of like, well, Blair, the HIO, knee, chest, kind of in that like, well, upper cervical, but like which one? And so what was it, I guess, that made you want to go knee, chest versus like, the CBP or the HIO or stuff like that?
It made sense to me, mechanically speaking. Nuka did not make sense to me. It still does not make sense to me. Blair kind of makes sense to me. Toggle kind of makes sense to me. Knee chest made the most sense to me. I still ask people that are into Nuka these days, like, what is it that's actually happening there? Maybe I should ask some top dogs or people that don't like me very much anyway. But so I always just go with what makes sense to you. I mean, knee chest work, like, it worked for me. I always hated that term. Like, students say, when I was a student, the common thing that students would say is, oh yeah, that technique just doesn't work for me. Like doing that technique on their patients, that doesn't work for me. Well, I really challenge you guys to think a little bit differently. It's not, maybe you're just not good at the technique. You know, that's kind of the way I always thought about it. Maybe you're just not any good. Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, oh, I can't do this. This doesn't work. My patient didn't get any better when I did this technique. Well, maybe it's because you're not any good at it. Like, think about that. Seriously. This is like not brain science here. So it just made mechanical sense to me. It's like I could see it. We took lateral x-rays or lateral head tilt x-rays. You know, we could see the atlas moving and the adjustment. I learned how to do that really well. It developed my speed. I practiced the speeder board. Gosh, some days I would go home and I would practice. I remember a couple times I would practice like 3 hours doing speeder board drills, palpating the spine, like 3 hours straight. You ever get in the zone and you just go and you lose track of time? I was already studying this stuff every single day. Carry your spine around. Like when you get back on campus, like carry your freaking spine around. Like, why is nobody carrying a spine? Why these days? Like when I was a student, I'm projecting onto you what I see on the Life West campus. But you know, carry around an atlas axis. Get a little plastic atlas and axis. Put it in your pocket. Carry it around all day and look. Don't play with it in your pocket, otherwise that will look kind of weird. But take it out of your pocket and feel it and study it and look at it and think about, oh wow, like actually ask questions to yourself. Oh wow, I wonder why it's shaped like this. Oh, look here, the facets are a little bit like this. Oh, look at how the facets are here. You can see that rotation, because I guarantee you, you are going to come to a point where you feel like you understand what the anatomy is, but then you're going to be asked a question, or you're going to come and look at it again, and you're going to be like, what? I don't know what I'm talking about. It's going to happen. You're going to get good at adjusting certain types of bodies, for example, and then somebody's going to come into the clinic or while you're a student in student clinic, and all your techniques just going to fall apart because you're not good at adjusting that type of body because you don't encounter it as much. I find that I attract people that are more like me. And I think you guys might as well. I realized that when I took over, I substituted for my brother-in-law's practice at one point, not doing ART, doing full spine chiropractic work. And I was like, wow, these people, the type of people that he attracts into his practice are a lot different than my patients. And I think that'll be the case with you guys as well. But yeah, carry your spine around, study this stuff, figure out what makes sense to you, and just pick something. Pick one thing. Get really good at it. Yeah, go to other things so you expand your perspective, other technique groups, so you get asked different questions. But get really good at something. Get really good at adjusting with your hands. And then maybe learn machines too, right? Get fast. Develop those fast twitch fibers. Develop the right biomechanics. Do the exercise drills. Right? You guys have ninjas there? I hear that's pretty popular. Ninjas, yeah, ninjas is everywhere now. Some people love them, some people hate them. Whatever. Do whatever, you know, find something that you like. I'm not going to tell you guys, you know, go follow this group or this philosophy. But I am going to tell you to study the spine. You guys are going to be chiropractors. Understand the difference between vitalism and mechanism. And that's going to evolve and become much deeper over time. You know, the question for tonight was, how has my knowledge and application of chiropractic philosophy changed since I graduated? Well, the knowledge, it's kind of a tricky question. I thought about this, but really the knowledge hasn't changed much because I studied so much while I was in school. A lot of doctors, they come across the chiropractic philosophy later on down the line. But honestly, it's the best way to go. It is so good. Your patients, when you get really good at a technique and you come at it from a standpoint of a vitalistic perspective, people get better. Like it just blows my mind. It's amazing how the body works. You're going to change so many people's lives, but only if you study and get good at chiropractic. Don't let any more days and weeks and months go by where you haven't palpated anybody. Don't let any days or weeks or months go by where you don't even understand the biomechanics of the spine, or you don't understand the anatomy. You know, you're going to find a technique that resonates with you. If you haven't, I don't know, just go find a few and see what vibes with you. Do one, and then go from there. Like I said, I can't even think of a person. I can think of a lot of people that have changed their techniques, but I can't think of off the top of my head anybody that is doing the same technique they thought they were going to originally do. Any more questions?
It's looking like we're good, Doc.
Awesome.
Can't thank you enough, brother. We really appreciate this. This has been fantastic. Really, I appreciate it very much. Thank you from the Delts and everybody at Parker.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Good to see you guys.
All right, y'all. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow. We got the last part of Delt Week. We got business coming up tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your night, guys.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.